Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we're going to be talking about how the perception of others influences our self worth. So it seems as though it's a psychological topic, but I think it sets precedents in the philosophical world. And as a matter of fact, I think it's going to set the biggest precedents for our episode on authenticity, because I think the principles of authenticity are very important to discuss in the modern age, but yet the best answers we have are pre-social media, pre all these, things we have access to these days. And I think that definitely changes the considerations in that changes the considerations that lead to the answer of authenticity. And that's why I'd like to discuss how much do we do for others.
Well, yeah, I think philosophy is the base for all of the science, basically, all of the sciences, basically. And so going with psychology seems natural. It's just going to be a more specific application of our discussion of authenticity. Often, when we discuss philosophy, it's in broad terms and we have to rely on examples. So I guess this episode is the example and simply discussed more in depth here and now.
100%. We have a 15-point prompt by ChatGPT, so we're going to have plenty of examples to discuss. And I wanted to start off with, not confusing the goal of this episode with authenticity, because, authenticity is being true to who you are and how much your actions align with your values. And the goal of this episode is to ascertain how much, social approval guides our actions. So I think there's a very big distinction there, but I also think our episode on authenticity is going to be much richer because we have this precedent.
So would you say the distinction is here it's a question of, is this how we act? How is it in reality? And then about authenticity, it's going to be how much should we be authentic? So now it's a matter of in reality what happens, and then it's going to be a matter of how it should be.
Yeah, I think okay. Let's put it like this. This episode can raise awareness to how much. Well, because I already have, of course, my preconceived notion before we start of how much we do for others, and that can definitely raise an awareness of how to return to authenticity. And then I think of the importance of returning to authenticity, but how that is going to be achieved and what is going to only be answered in the episode of authenticity. So I think the easiest way for me to picture social influence is through obviously this one, the thought experiment of you becoming the last person on Earth, right? Humans have imagined this multiple times. Maybe you can turn to something like an apocalypse, like The Walking Dead, or maybe a better estimate of what zero social pressure, zero need for societal approval would be, is kind of the Black Mirror episode where, do you remember that everyone could rate people and they could be either 5-star rated by other people, and it wasn't like just like for their services, it was by their interactions, and what was rated was their personality essentially. But the interesting thing is the people who had 1 star were put in a parallel universe where they were on Earth and they kind of participated in life, but they were invisible to all the other people, so as to not interact with the higher rated participants. So I think that's interesting, because imagining that there are no people on Earth, you could come to conclusions such as, well, I wouldn't be working, right? You wouldn't go to your work every day. But I also think that it's part of your authentic self, the job you use, the job you decide to do in your life, and all those things. So those aren't the societal pressures I mean to eliminate with the thought experiment. I simply mean to eliminate the need for approval. So if you were on Earth, but absolutely no one cared about you, no one, looked twice, it was a judgment-free zone, if you will, okay? What would it look like? I think, for certain elements of our talk, it's going to be useful to imagine an Earth with only you in it, right? To answer certain questions. But there are going to be simplistic elements. I think when you get, societally more complex, we're gonna have to use like a more intricate thought experiment.
Yeah, I can see that being useful in a vacuum for certain thought experiments or certain thought processes that are going to happen during this episode, but I definitely see its flaw where a lot of the things we do, we want to approximate authenticity, but when we do things for other people, which we often do, and we interact every day with everyone, and even if we don't want to just do what they like, we have to interact and work with people and work against them or with them. And so imagining an Earth that where we're alone is not really useful either.
I think being free of societal approval has a place in happiness, but the problem is, as we've discussed in our episode on happiness, it's the long-term things and the interpersonal relationships that also matter. But I also think that, for the purpose of the thought experiment, we also discussed how important human connection is for happiness, but we talked about the importance of adjusting your life values to what is available to you. So if we do hop into that example, maybe we can, use our imagination and reinvent our life values for that thought experiment, or maybe we can adjust the thought experiment as well. In any case, I think I wanted to kind of introduce the way we're going to approach these points in the prompt, but we can start with the first one. Fashion and dressing style. Our clothing choices can be influenced by both societal trends and our personal preferences. Balancing the desire to fit in with current fashion while expressing our unique style can be a challenge. Well, my outlook on clothing, and I'm sure it will transfer to, fashion, perhaps. I don't know if it's another point, but we can discuss it out of, we can put it out of the way because it's the way we choose to present ourselves to the world. Makeup goes into that, right? If we were to ask what are the objectives of clothing being the base of fashion, my answer would be very simple, and it's a basic human need, and it provides comfort because we can't just walk around naked, and also it provides a protection against the elements and nature. So of course, if you ask me what a person who is completely free of societal pressure would wear, it would be something that is weather appropriate and that accomplishes the goal of their comfort, right? And I definitely don't think that that's the intention behind how people dress. I think there are very few people that dress like that. And in fact, I think if you have found something that, fits the comfort level and also fits, on average, the weather, you would dress something like Steve Jobs. He found his jeans, he found his black shirt or, turtleneck, and that's what he wears. Well, perhaps, if he didn't have to be in a professional environment that much, he would even go, more loose, right, with maybe sandals or something like that. But at least that part, it rings true. Why wouldn't your clothing be constant if you're not dressing for others? And also, I should stop talking, but I forgot to introduce the new way we structure our episode. And I think maybe you can talk about this. Maybe you can talk about the general outlook on societal pressure that people have, right? Because that's what we're trying to establish first in our talks is what do people think and then what do we think? And also answer the first part of the prompt.
So now you want me to talk about how people in general view social pressure?
Yeah, how much of what they do they attribute to it? And then we'll obviously discuss how true is that.
I don't want to make blanket statements, and I think it's definitely hard to determine where that line is. But generally, I think people overestimate a lot how much they make their own decisions and how much society influences them to do what they do. And maybe I can mix this in with the clothes question. I think people don't realize how much clothes are for other people. Chris was talking about Steve Jobs, and just for the record, he wears some shorts and a black t-shirt. Chris does. most of the time. So he really lives by what he just said. But anytime people dress in a colorful way, in a stylish way, in a way to impress people, to stand out, I don't think people realize,
Even provocative, right? Maybe that's a word you wanted to include there.
yeah, because provocative for whom, You're not wearing provocative clothes for you. It's definitely to provoke some reaction from others. But people definitely don't realize how much it is for other people. It is to impress other people, to make people think you're more stylish than them, or maybe just that you are a stylish person, that you take care of yourself, stuff like that. And I'm saying all this, and I don't think it's bad. I dress this way, right? I dress so I look good for other people. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think looking good is good, but you can also realize that you're doing it for other people. And there's no one that's not affected by cultural standards either. If Chris was living in 1930s, he wouldn't be wearing a black t-shirt and shorts because then that wouldn't have been appropriate. Even he is influenced by cultural standards.
Right. I'd be wearing the staple straw hat,
Yes.
straw t-shirt.
Yes.
19
Leather shorts.
You said 1930 leather shorts and
Wooden
sandals.
Yes, obviously. But yeah, I personally think the Peaky Blinders outfits are very cool. Right? The hat, I love it. I would love to just casually wear 4 layers all the time, right? A shirt and then a jacket and then some type of other jacket and then a coat over it. I think that looks very stylish. But when I try something that resembles that at home, I look ridiculous because that's not the trend that's in right now. And I'm not going to put that on because I dress for other people, partly. I would feel insecure in that, even though I think it looks good. And I think in general, that applies to other people. It's not only me that's hyper influenced by other people and what other people would think. I think in general, clothing is for other people.
Absolutely. And, I think, as cheesy as it sounds, I think this episode is to raise a little bit of accountability on how much of it, right, we do for others. And here, while you were talking, I thought about the following. When people say, I would like to kind of even further our point. When people say, oh, I really like this shirt, like you get complimented on your shirt and you say, oh yeah, thanks, I really like it, that's why I wore it. Well, the interesting thing about that is I don't think you understand what you mean by saying I like it, because what I think you mean is I thought people would like it on me. And the proof of that is during the malady that plagued us for the last 3 years, which I cannot name, you didn't wear your favorite shirt around the house. You didn't wear your favorite dress for that occasion around the house. And I think that if it was a genuine relationship between you and that piece of clothing, and what you truly meant was the words that you pronounced, and you said, I like this shirt, and or I like this shirt on me, then you would have been wearing it. But no, you use it for something we call special occasions. Special occasions where you feel the need more so than usual to impress people, correct?
Yeah. And I think my point would be more to say that I like this shirt means within the social context I'm in, I feel good about how this shirt will look for other people. I don't feel ashamed wearing it. And you like it. My main point is you there's some part of it that's your preference. Some people genuinely wear some shirt that goes somewhat out of the standard, but they like it. But there's always society mixed in and what they will think about you mixed into your evaluation of clothing.
Absolutely. And the same extends for makeup, right? If you didn't wear makeup during the lockdown, then you are doing it purely for other people, right? If you woke up truly, 30 minutes earlier than usual, you put your makeup on and then you started your day alone at home, then you know what? I can tell you that you are someone that truly does that for themselves.
And it also logically works pretty well because when I pick a shirt in the morning, most of the time, 90% of the day, I'm not going to be seeing the shirt I'm wearing. I'm looking in front of me and I don't see it. Other people see it. all that comes in to the factors you consider then is comfort, how it sits on you, right? Yeah, we've been banging hard on this nail, but I don't think, as I said, there's any shame in it, and I think there's even some pride you can take in your sense of style, because it does take some skill to be attuned to the fashion of the times, and to pick out the right clothing, and to look good. There's no shame in that, but you just have to acknowledge that at least partly, and perhaps mostly, it's for other people.
Beautifully said. And this is kind of a personal quirk, but and if we're spending this time on point 1 out of 15, we're going to be in trouble, but it's the messages that people carry on their shirts that infuriates me, because there's a Canadian company called Raised by Wolves, and you could, in quotes, call their clothing quality, but I also think that people, especially guys, love to just walk around with something that says raised by wolves on their back because it feels cool and it looks cool. But I also think that isn't there a Disney thing where the guy is actually raised by tigers?
Yeah, the Jungle Book.
Yeah, I would like to get one of my quotes out here right now. And it's the following: if you have to say it, you don't display it. So I'm pretty sure that the people who feel the need to wear something that says raised by wolves on their backs, they want the rest of the world to think they were. Well, first of all, obviously they weren't, but it definitely adds a cool hypothetical element that, you have this, I don't know, either you've had a hard upbringing or perhaps you're versed in the wild world of the jungle where wolves live.
Maybe you're a very good howler.
Yeah, maybe you are. That I can deny, but I also think that if you tell me that in addition, this company is overpriced. So if you tell me that you go out of your way to buy that shirt or the hoodie because you like it, then I think there's some accountability and maybe personal honesty to work through there, and I think you truly want people to get a certain impression of you, and you're willing to pay that good money for it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hate on it more than you already have, because I really like David Goggins' clothing, but I definitely do avoid when I buy clothes. This, I don't like having brands on my shirt, saying like any writing on my shirt. Some logo designs are cool and I like to have them, but having a message just feels cringe and forced to me. Just live your life like you embody that message, and that's it. And maybe we should move on to point 2 now.
Maybe, but I still have a bone to pick with people wearing antisocial social club or other provocative messages like I am that guy. Well, okay, you know what? Maybe it's a personal sentiment, and that can definitely conclude our point. But when I see a shirt saying I am the strongest, right? All of these messages are subliminally saying that. No one's gonna buy a shirt that says I am the strongest. But if you look at those motivational merches or whatever, that's essentially what they're saying subliminally. Well, I like to believe that if I walk around the street and am challenged on the point that I wear on my skin, right? The phrases that are written upon me, I want to be ready. In my head, I want to be ready for that challenge, right? If someone sees you with, does David Goggins merch, let's say some of it says, who's going to carry the boats?
Yeah, sure.
Right. And I'm just this guy who kind of just, goes to the gym maybe once every 2 weeks and, follows the normal path of school and, likes to watch movies. I would never feel comfortable saying, you know what? You asked and you saw me in the street and you asked who's going to carry the boats. I can't say it's going to be me. So how is that fair?
Yeah, I think it takes some knowledge of David Goggins to understand what he's saying a bit, but yeah, it's definitely, there are exceptions, and some people that wear some messages truly do embody that, including David Goggins, who wears his own merch. But I think most of the time it is to put on an air and to seem to other people like you do embody that message without having to prove it, because life is so calm and peaceful now that you probably won't have to prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was unfair of me to not kind of explain myself in the David Goggins thing. So who's going to carry the boat simply means, who's going to be the toughest person to accept all the challenges, like the most extreme challenges, because the context is he was in the Navy and
Yeah, he was going through Hell Week, and which is a training regimen they do, if you could call that a training regimen, basically torture. And they have a series of tasks, and basically the challenge is just living through that 36-hour period, I think, or 2-day period, and most people don't. So if you just carry on carrying the boats, you're a tough guy, one of the toughest people on earth.
yeah, my point two disappeared, but interpersonal relationships are point three. So, this is where it gets more complex. I think we can isolate certain situations by maybe eliminating all the other people in your lives. From my high school days, I definitely hung out with some people that I didn't necessarily want to hang out with simply because the group accepted them and they were part of the group, and that's how it was. Well, I think if you said, what if I remove every single friend from that friend group and leave you this one? Would they still have a place in your life? And if my answer is no, then I am, through societal pressure, forced to entertain a friendship with them. And, if we go back to kind of the question, maybe we can address it at every point. The question of the general outlook on this, I think people have trouble admitting to themselves a little bit because everyone gets in these, groups of friends and they're like, well, I've known them for 4 years. They've been at all the gatherings we've done. And I mean, they've kind of got that going for them, but I don't really like them. And if it were up to me, they wouldn't be in the group. Well, that is not your friend. Okay. Well, let's just be genuine about it. That's not someone you can call a friend. I think you have to isolate the situation and ask yourself, would those people have a place in my life if it weren't for all the other interrelations they have with my friend group?
I think, once again, this is a point that we make that is reasonable and that upon reflection, people would also reach. It's just that people usually don't think about it. There's a
I feel
friend.
like you're turning to me. Those are my words. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it. I love it.
I don't know if I do. There's people that are there, and you in theory, spend a lot of time with them, is if spending time with them is being in the same room as them. But say there's a friend that's there because your other friends like them, and you've hung out with them for the past 4 years, but you don't really talk to them during those things. Maybe in a group conversation, you exchange some phrases, and if you were to find out more about them and know their personality, you would actually dislike them. And I think you're right. I think it is true that some people would call those friends that are in the friend group friends, that the criteria for friendship is not high enough for some people. But upon reflection, I think we can agree that this is overdone.
Okay, let's move on to point four because I think you concluded that well. And just to be fair, because I have a lot to say on every single one of those points, maybe you can start this one off. Career choices. The career paths we pursue can be influenced by societal expectations, family pressure, and the desire for status. Or they can align with our true passions and talents.
I think they definitely do. Just to preface my response on this, my outlook on career choices is that there's not one job that you choose and that was the one you were destined to do. Just like in relationships, you don't have one soulmate, and if you don't find them, well, then you shouldn't be with anyone because that was your true love. I think you have some values that have been, even that have either been installed in you by your upbringing or that you were born with, that push you towards some category. And then within that category, the jobs that align with your values, you choose one and you're going to be happy with that if that aligns with your values. But the specific job you choose within that range, I think is definitely is definitely influenced by family, friends, other people's opinions, how the job is looked at by society, and simply random occurrences, right? Some, let's say I'm choosing between medicine and just psychology. some psychologist comes to my school and really sparks my interest into psychology. But in an alternate universe, it was a doctor that comes to my school and talks about the profession and is really passionate about it, and just through sheer dumb luck, I get influenced into one path over the other. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. You know, as I said, I think people are happy as long as their job aligns with their values, challenges them enough. And so there are many options, but the final choice you make and the thing that you end up doing is definitely influenced by society, also by random occurrences, and just people's opinions, as we said, by many things.
Yeah, you've kind of given the positive outlook, what's new, but I have an example of when a friend came to me in their selection process for universities, and she had narrowed it down for two universities. And I don't remember the details, but I remember two of the points that, we're compiling a pros and cons list, and I only remember 2 points, and I think it's very interesting that on one of the sides it was a more local university, and one of the arguments was a lot of my friends go there, and the other side was my sister went to the other university, and my mom wants me to go to the other university. Okay, so her two biggest points of debate were socially rooted, and
Well, the two you remember, maybe they were the biggest ones.
they were kind of the ones that we narrowed it down to being the most important ones, which is also the reason I remember it. But I think it's very interesting because if you use my, masterful 40 years from now perspective, and you look back at your life and you see how, because it was also different kind of programs, right? It was in the same field, but the way, the approach to that field was offered in different ways in the different universities. And if you take
Do
the
you remember what exactly that was? And those
no,
two
it's
things were
something I always blank out when people tell me about their majors. I'm like, oh, really? So social computer engineering? Like, okay, whatever, man.
still, that seems a little crazy, right? That the two biggest factors are social and what other people want them to do, or yeah, whatever. When another factor is also the actual program they're going to get into.
Absolutely. And the problem is she was leaning away. Well, that's not really, substantiated as, okay, we're not in court, but essentially it's not very relevant. But she did end up choosing the one that her mom wanted to go into. But her instinct at the beginning, I remember, was to choose the more local one. Is she happy now? I don't know. I should talk to her. But my 40 years from now
I should call
perspective,
her.
I should call her. The 40 years from now perspective is kind of, if you look back at your life and you see that it wasn't really you that made the choice that, governed the next 40 years of your life and the way, the legacy that you leave on this earth. And it was just through, even I disagree with both arguments, with both sides. But if I were to say, I mean, even something as trivial as having friends, I mean, what were the friends that she had? Like, people she had known for 2 years in high school. Those were people that had classes in common with her. Would you want that to influence the legacy you leave on Earth? Just being more comfortable around some people you know? I doubt it. So I think, again, just a reminder about accountability. I think we have to be honest with ourselves in saying, if our goal is authenticity as such, a method that I've come up with is make a pros and cons list for every decision you make, and then erase everything that contains someone else's name. Everything, right? Oh, parent influence, erase it. More friends here, erase it. What remains? This thing makes me more happy. This thing is more aligned with my life values.
I'm not sure I like your example entirely, because I could easily see, well, not I could easily see, I think that, her university experience would have been influenced by whether her friends were there or not. The quality of her education maybe wouldn't have been influenced, or maybe it would have, because taking classes with friends is more enjoyable. People, since they enjoy them more, are more motivated to come, and that's just another reason to, stick with school, or even put in more effort, be in competition with your friends. And yes, she can make other friends, but it makes her transition more smooth.
Oh, I think the consideration of the value of comfort that friends provide in view, in contrast with something as colossal as a life path is kind of ludicrous. I mean,
I understand, but I would say that you have to choose some factors. Because I think of my choice, right? I was choosing between two universities that are both relatively close, but I was choosing in the same program in psychology. And the fact is, I didn't even visit the schools before actually choosing between the two. I chose one of them because you went to it, and also because it has a better reputation and whatnot. But the point I'm trying to make is that when I was choosing between those two schools, all I can base myself off is mostly what other people say. What you say, what other people think of the schools, the reputation it has, because it's literally impossible for me to have had the experience of going to both schools and choose in advance what I would like to live through, because I don't know.
okay. That's fine that you get your information elsewhere. We're very limited with the information we can gather ourselves. I think we have to remind ourselves that the question is about societal pressure, the judgment we get from others, right? It's the anticipation of their reaction. I'm not saying, the thing you were free from is my reaction to your choice of university. That's something you were free from. It's not like, oh, my brother went there, therefore this. No, no, no. Okay. My brother went there. I have more information on these parts because he can tell me. But if I do a pros and cons list, my name is not going to be there.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I guess my point, you're right. Thank you for bringing me back. I think my point would be then the social pressure thing doesn't apply for her friends necessarily. I think I can definitely see a world where she wanted to be with her friends not because, oh, that's what they choose, and then if I choose otherwise, they would judge me or whatnot, but just because I want to be with my friends in the same university. The thing with the mom is definitely a different one. Or maybe, I could even see that being different, right? Maybe her mom wants her to be there because she was a teacher there and she knows that the school is good. Without knowing the reasons, I can't say much, but yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with you that if the thing was, oh, my mom wants me to go there, she's never been there, is just because she likes the school more, she likes the vibe more, and then I don't want to disappoint my mom. But factually, I have more reasons to go to the other school. That's definitely bad, yeah.
Yeah, and without getting into much detail, that's kind of what it was. But it's good that I brought you back because you brought me back and reminded me that indeed the friend argument was only about, it wasn't about the judgment of the friends about her leaving them at an unknown university, unsafe. It was simply about the fact that she wanted to be around her friends. And again, you could include that in societal pressure, but not to the same extent as your mother having a life path forged for you. But what I want to say is, because she did end up going to the university where her friends weren't, in recounting the events, I would like her to say, my mom chose my university. That's actually what I want to happen after people hear this episode. I want accountability.
Right. To realize, like, I think people describe their choices in retrospect differently than they did in the moment. I chose a particular university. Well, actually, I can tell my thought process pretty well because I know what I thought, and it's pretty recent in my mind. It would be more shameful for your friend to say, "Yeah, my mom wanted me to go there, so I go there." And I definitely don't think that that's what she says to her friends or to people that ask, but that's actually what happened.
Well, it's perhaps something she hasn't gotten to when she thinks about it at night for herself. And I think self honesty is also one of the goals of this episode. All right, so that kind of concludes that one. Social activities. Social activities we engage in, such as hobbies, sports, or entertainment choices, may be influenced by what is popular or by what brings us genuine joy and fulfillment. So here I have a very good example and a recent one. I think we're going to alternate the points. I'm going to read one and say my opinion first, and then blah, blah, blah. I also think we're going to have less and less to say about points as they advance because so much will already have been said.
Yeah, I feel it a bit already. Yeah.
But again, I thought of this genuinely, and it's not like some philosopher's conclusion. It's a thing that striked me, and I think I was invited to something like I was invited to mini bowling, and I thought to myself, how do I determine something that I want to do, I as a person? Because I had an intuition of that not being something that's fun for me, but I was willing to do it for my friends. And the thought is, would I do that thing if no one was around? Would I choose to go and do that thing alone? And if I seed in going to the mini bowling, but also realize that that's not something I would do alone, I think a correct way to frame it would be that my friends chose an activity for me and I was willing to make a sacrifice. But I think some people do things that they don't necessarily enjoy and they have an intuition for that, and maybe that bothers them, but they're with their friends and it's kind of worth it and they kind of just keep doing it. I think it's important to address that.
I think it comes out more in repeated occurrences. I know you're not a fan of new experiences and doing new things just for the sake of doing new things, but I think it's not problematic in those instances where I've never gone mini bowling. I would go just to go, and I think most people, have some curiosity or that are open-minded to the idea of doing new activities. Maybe they would like them, would do that, and that's okay. But what we should bring out and what we should note for people is when you repeatedly do those activities to fit in with the group, to not get their disapproval and to just stay hip, but there are factors that pull you in both directions. In one sense, there's the social disapproval, but also there's the just positive aspect of social activities, being with other people.
Also,
Which
the fear of missing out, that's a big one. One of your friends said this one day, and it was, at the end of the night, and they were very drunk, and we were about to go outside and for a walk because we were still active, but he was going to go to sleep. And he said something I'll always remember, and he said, "No, I don't want to miss out on what you guys are going to be doing." And he wanted to kind of, rummage through his completely inebriated state just for the sake, and make that kind of sacrifice, if you want to call it, and just to be part of it, right? And I think that's a person that is quite highly socially driven, and I think, I don't know, it takes some courage to admit it.
yeah, and there's some degrees to the fear of missing out, and there's some positive aspects and some negative aspects. I think my friend in that moment was having a good time and was doing that specific activity because he likes his friends and he likes the activity we're doing and is not doing it just for us. And so in that case, the fear of missing out, sort of pulls him in that direction, even though maybe he shouldn't, but he's not doing something that's against his nature, so it's not that bad. But when the fear of missing out pulls you to go to an activity that you don't like just because you don't want to miss the gossip, that's definitely less good.
I think the thing that I kind of figured out has transferability to parties or festivals. And I definitely understand that it's more complex. And, I've had people kind of dismiss the question, people who do like parties or festivals. But my question to you is, if you break down a party or, a bar into its elements, social presence, music, I don't know, lights, alcohol. 3 of the 4 are things that you can obtain at home, right? You can go into your basement, you can turn off the lights and perhaps, bring a monitor with a multicolor light in there.
A disco ball?
Yeah, a disco ball if you have
multicolor light.
No, but a disco ball if you have the budget for it, but if not, here's another solution: a speaker and alcohol. You can essentially have all the elements that any festival or, bar presence has at home. And the only difference and the reason why you go do it at a bar is the social presence, because that's the only thing you cannot get on your own. And I think this is where people go wrong. Often people say, well, I just want to let loose. I want to dance. I like dancing. That's why I go to clubs. Well, I just kind of want to have drinks, right? Those are all things that are available at home. You can even combine them at home. The reason you go to bars is solely because of the social presence and the social interactions that pull you. And I don't want people to, be mistaken on that point, because I think it's preposterous when people say, well, I like dancing and, I can kind of dance in the club. Well, you can dance in your basement. You want people watching. I like people watching me dance. Clip that out of context.
Well, okay. Yeah, you have a very aggressive manner of saying it, so maybe I want to just
What? No.
your mic flashed red. So maybe I just want to reassure people that, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. You're human. We like social activities.
100%. My apologies. Accountability. All I'm asking for. Nothing wrong with it. Accountability.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you can dance at home, but it's definitely less fun to dance at home alone. Yeah.
I think the outlines of the episode are becoming more clear now. Their preciseness of language, which is something I hold dear, and accountability. When you say something to me, I want it to be true. And I also wanted you to be honest with yourself when you're saying it to me. Those are the two things we're after. Oh, social media presence. Very interesting. Our online persona and how we present ourselves on social media can be driven by seeking approval and validation from others, or it can reflect our authentic self-expression.
Yeah, once again, I think I'm going to give my outlook on it. I don't have a very big social media presence. I think it's a personal choice for me. I don't judge
You
people.
know, in the tens of thousands of followers, but whatever.
Okay, yeah,
Whatever.
we may have a million or two followers and listeners, but I keep my social media presence to a minimum because I want to avoid vices at all price, the at all cost. The reason I don't post that much is because I fear that somewhere in my motivations there's a need for social approval, and having thought of it extensively, I think that the way I will become ultimately confident and the most confident I can be is by being secure in the efforts I put in the activities I do for myself without any other person knowing. Maybe my close friends that I just tell my life to and tell the activities I've been doing will know. I want to just advertise the work I put in and the things I do the least amount I can, in case there's somewhere in me something looking for social approval, because I think that that's not a good thing for me. I don't judge other people that do it. I don't know what's going on in their head, but I think it's not an exaggeration on my part to say that most people have posted in their lifetime for the wrong reasons. You go on a trip. What's the reason you post photos from your trip? So that your friends can see what you've been doing? Sure, I think that's a good reason. And I think that, maybe you're listening to this podcast and say, yeah, that's why I did it. I did it for a good reason. But I definitely think that there's either a really small part of you or a big part of you that did it for the social approval and showing off that you went on a trip. I do things with my life. I'm adventurous. I'm cool, and I want people to know it. And I want to appear that way to their eyes, which is not necessarily a bad thing if you truly are adventurous, and that's just a true portrayal of you. But I'm getting lost in my own things, but that's the reason I don't post on social media that much.
I think for two reasons your view is limited. I think you said that, and that was going to be one of my big questions. Well, is there any authentic, coming back to authenticity, but is there any authentic way or non-social acceptance seeking way to post on social media? And you said posting the picture of your hike. Well, if you look at popular social media like Instagram or Facebook, as a general rule, people's profiles are public, right? So anyone can see. Okay. As a general rule, people give them out in a very, frivolous, is that a word?
That's a word. I don't know if that's the word you're looking for, but you get the vibe, listeners. Frivolous.
Yeah, just frivolously. They give it out to any random person. So the people who follow them are also going to be, old friends from high school that haven't spoken to in years. And the reason they post their hike on Instagram is for people who will not provide any value to their lives, right? That's not an authentic activity to do. To see their hiking photo. And the solution to that would be, of course, people with whom you can share that experience and receive value from, right?
We'll find it out because you talk to them often and you're going to tell that story, right?
What?
Okay, carry on with your thing. Maybe I misread.
Let's say the people who truly will give you something in exchange for you telling them that you were going on a hike, or maybe your best friends or your significant other, right? You share life experiences, you catch up. That's something that's part of your daily life. By making something open to the public, right? Public profile, people you don't really care to receive a reaction from. I think you kind of condemn yourself to caring about insignificant people's reaction. Well, it's significant for that purpose at the very least. So I would actually argue that there are no real authentic or
Yeah, I like the way you said you condemn yourself to caring about people's reactions. I think even if it's not your intention, supposedly, to do it for other people, you inevitably look at the comments and the number of likes you get and the number of people that look at it, and you get some sort of reaction from that. And yeah, I think you said it right. You condemn yourself to that as soon as you post.
and
Yeah.
those are interactions that wouldn't otherwise exist if you hadn't posted, right? You get a looking good from a person you haven't spoken to in 3 years. The only value they've provided in your life for the past 3 years is giving you a morale boost, a cheap dopamine hit from a photo you posted with the express purpose of getting that social approval.
I think you definitely, I agree with you. So we have a point here. My only fear for that and why I hold back in the way I speak is that maybe we're, old fashioned people that want to keep their circles small and want to talk to only a few people in our lives and want to tell everything to only a few people. Maybe times are changing and those relationships that are every time I post something, I text the person to see how they're doing, have value for people. And maybe times have changed and that's something that's normal and not necessarily bad. And so if the purpose of those posts is to reconnect with those people and keep in touch through the internet and that has value for someone, maybe it's not all a bad thing. But as I said, I think you definitely condemn yourself to caring about the reactions of others as well when you post.
Okay, so then to the question, I understand like the value of a social network, but to the question, is there a way that isn't attention seeking to post something privately, which seems like a paradox? But I think I have an answer in mind, and it would be something that is informative. The counterpart of that we can get into when we have an episode on ego or pride. But I think if it's purely informative, you turn to someone like David Goggins. I mean, he announces the release of his new book. He's not looking for approval. That's publicity, right? I think it's when it doesn't have the again the number of responses you get to the interest shown in your book is going to be proportional to how good you feel about you posting. But it seems as though maybe the intentionality behind the post matters. Maybe something that is purely informational and can have.
I mean, I think what I would have to say for the someone publicizing their book example is that you've written a book because you think it has a message that the world needs to hear and you want to publicize it to help other people. Can that be said about most posts on the internet? Which
Absolutely not.
exactly, yeah.
And in fact, I mean, it can almost be said that if you are in the picture, it loses its value as something that is purely informational.
Well, maybe the book
maybe
cover has the photo of the person, but yeah, I see
or
what
maybe you
mean.
want to relay the information that you've spent time with President Barack Obama or he's signed your book or something, and you want to make that public. Well, that's a little bit attention seeking, but to a certain degree, it's an inevitability. But obviously, if it's an aesthetic post, if it's I don't know where we're going with this. I'm sure this is more appropriate a discussion for other episodes. So maybe we can move on. Values and beliefs. I actually have one of my blog posts on this, and maybe I can get your live response to my thought experiment. And it's about if you were born in a world that didn't have any concept of philosophy or religion, right? People just kind of went along with things, right? Just imagine that. And then I throw you in a cellar for a week, and then I explain to you, you have to determine the nature of the fundamental questions of life, of reality. you have to answer what is the nature of fundamental concepts like pride, honor, all those things, right? Essentially, I'm asking you to develop a philosophy and explaining what a philosophy is to you because in your world, you don't know it. I think that is the way to develop a philosophy that is fully isolated from societal pressures. And in a way, well, yes, I'm getting your informational response, but in a way, that is what we're doing now, right? I don't really care about the pressure of your judgment about my thoughts. Although right now you're clapping your eyes and you're raising your hands. You seem
Are
very
my
angry.
eyelids that big that they clap?
Yeah, you just seem like a very angry overall person. But okay, that's obviously satire. But I'm free from as we've established earlier, the episode is about societal judgment. So I think the purest way to arrive to a clean value and belief system would be through my thought experiment, the blank slate experiment. And not many people can do that. Many people hold certain beliefs because of pressures. Religion is a great example of that. I mean, you go to church with a certain community of people, you fear God, all those things. That's judgment, judgment, judgment. And I don't think that any religious person could say they're, exempt from societal pressure.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't know how human those people would be in your thought experiment if they don't have religion or philosophy in their daily lives. I can't easily imagine it, but I see what you're saying. And I think that another point I would have to bring on religion is that it's hard to argue that, well, it's hard to argue. I don't think it's true that one of the religions is right. So, depending on where you're born and into what family you're born in and what religion they practice, that's what's going to decide what religion you are, right? And what religion you're brought up in is most likely the one you're going to keep. Maybe some people expose themselves to other religion that later they find out align more with their values and everything. But as a general rule, you keep the religion you grow up with. So you're definitely influenced by external influences. But
Yeah, but don't you feel like some people just say, this is my choice, my choice? Is it? If you weren't born in that country, if you weren't born in that family, would you have chosen the same thing?
the
And
same religion specifically, what are you talking about?
yeah, the same belief system, the same. When I ask you about philosophical principles and you have a certain response to them, would they have changed if you were born in another? Well, again, I know you think that's a difficult thing to ascertain, but I don't think so.
No. I don't think it's a difficult thing to ascertain. I just think your belief system and values are also determined by societal pressures and stuff that happened in the past. And
But not
it's
pressures, and stuff that happened in the past is informational in nature,
okay.
right? What I'm saying is, yes, okay, if I were born with the same absolute brain, same biology in 200 years, I would have some very different responses for you. But I think at the very least, I have it as an objective in mind to approach that, judgment-free philosophy.
Oh, okay. I think I get where you're going, but then I think your example is not very useful because the vibe I was getting is that you were saying, oh, no one else practices philosophy, you develop it on your own. And what I was going to say is that, you read texts of philosophers that are, formed independently their own opinions, but not independently because they had philosophers that were there before them who also thought. And basically what I'm trying to say is that we all base our opinions
We're all in
and
this together, right?
we're all in this together more than you know.
You might be copyrighted for that, so I'll cut it out. But
Yeah, I think I sang that too well. So I think your world is not realistic in that sense because I couldn't develop a value system and belief system independently entirely. There has to have been something before, or
well,
my
what
belief.
would the first person who invented
Right,
philosophy
right.
say
That
to
belief
that?
system would be very primitive, and maybe it would be a case of trial and error of, oh, let's hypothesize that killing in general is good, and then because it feels good, and then I try it, and through societies, what evolves is the belief system and the value system that tells us that killing is bad because in the past that's what we've experienced.
Okay, I don't agree, but let's move on.
What? Okay, okay.
Well, just because I don't think experience is that important. I think experience often matches intuition. And, although I haven't killed anyone, I have a very precise intuition about doing it. And I have a very precise intuition about death in general.
I'm
And I
I'm
haven't
convinced
experienced
I'm
that.
convinced that that's influenced more by others people's thoughts than you think. By the way you're speaking right now.
Well, when people are presented with a trolley problem but haven't actually had to kill people, and we take their intuitions as something revelatory for philosophy, I don't see how we can say that experience is essential for that.
I'm not sure what the trolley problem brings. I guess I think it's
Well, it asks about intuitions about killing people from people who supposedly, as a majority, haven't killed before.
I mean the answers to the trolley problem are based off the philosophy students that respond to the trolley problem base their response on other texts they've read and how they were brought up and their thoughts on killing too.
No, that's the entire point of thought experiment. The thought experiments bring out your intuition, and that's where it
Yeah,
gets
but your
interesting.
intuition is not just, you're not a blank slate that spews out, okay, no, I would turn the trolley or I wouldn't turn the trolley. You're a person that has
Sure.
lived.
Nature and nurture, right? 50-50. But you don't have to
Allegedly.
have the nurture of philosophy to create that intuition. You have to have the nurture of life, right? To have heard about death. Like, I'm not saying you have to imagine a new philosophy in a completely blank world. I'm saying you have to imagine a new philosophy in a world devoid of a philosophy. That's not that far of a stretch because intuition is still present.
And I think it is a stretch. I guess we don't see the world where philosophy hasn't, where people, I guess, haven't decided to do philosophy yet as the same. I have very much difficulty to imagine, and the way I imagine it when I picture it is that there's a lot of trial and error, as there has been in history. Some philosophies are tried out and then don't work, and I think that's the
Yeah,
way.
every single one of them.
Well, yeah, but I think our intuition plays a big part. But the intuition we have now, it's just so hard for me to picture a blank slate because the intuition we have now is so influenced and embedded in ideas of other people and think based on things that happened in the past and thought processes that other people had in the past.
I've done my fair bit of research on biases, and I understand how prevalent psychological biases are, but when I can give you premises and a rational evolution of my argument, and you have to kind of face that and not me saying, oh, well, I read that from Kant. Can you really say that my intuition is that much stained by the world that already exists? I can tell you from scratch how I came up with this. I can tell you that honor is this because of this is this. My life experience. I give, actual examples in our podcast because I think personal life experience is of immense value and intuition is very important as well. And yes, to a certain degree, it's stained by the times, but we're also trying to arrive at a conclusion, a modern conclusion to these questions. And if our conclusion is to be valid, then it must be stained by the era in which we come up with them, correct?
I'm not sure what you're saying anymore. Let's just bring it back to social pressure. And I guess what's the point we're making about this?
I get lost, so I don't know.
We have to help him sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I require help. So beliefs, good. Your own beliefs, better. Someone else's beliefs that you pass up as your own,
Boo.
think about it. Communication style,
That's the next point, by the way.
yeah, that's the next point. There's not much interesting to be said about that. I think I have a very specific way to talk to my bosses, and I have a very specific way to talk to my friends, and I will be very open in admitting that I'm fully socially influenced in the way that I talk, and I don't have anything more interesting to say about that.
Yeah, I think you have to work within a frame when you talk to your boss. You have to talk to your boss in a certain way because you approach talking to your boss within a frame where you don't swear, whereas with your friends you would swear, and that's useful because it would not be very socially productive to swear around your boss and to kid around and to start joking because when you're with him or her, you're within a professional setting and you want to keep it that way. So I think that's communication style. Is this Chat GPT made?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a non-point because, well, a non-point, some one we don't really need to talk about because that's one where social pressure, if that you can call it social pressure, is something that's good and
Yeah. Personal goals and aspirations, that's kind of in the same vein as career, so I wouldn't like to talk about that. Body image and self-esteem, I think, is very interesting because people who, I was going to say struggle, but I don't believe in that. People who experience weight fluctuations, right, will understand more. During the lockdown, I think it's a very cool thought experiment that happened where if I were to ask the question, if no one had to look at you for a year, how would you look? What is you, right? And unfortunately, the answer for me was, and it's something I'm trying to grow out of for sure, is I don't care. I'm not gonna run. Are you kidding me? No one's looking at me. I mean, I'm not gonna get up because I don't have to go to school. I'm gonna eat whenever I'm hungry because I always have access to my fridge. Those were my answers, and those were, part of my identity at the time. And I think I learned a valuable lesson. If let go, I would, gain weight and become overweight and unhealthy. But it wasn't the resurgence of societal pressure that made me change because, a little bit of time after the isolation was done, I was still like that. It was the reframing of the way I approached fitness and health. And when I made them more personal and more of my goal, and if I am to be put in a situation like my thought experiment, or
everything is just a thought experiment. The lockdown is a thought experiment.
maybe that's the title of the episode, but
Yeah, you reach that same conclusion irregardless of social pressures or not.
okay, that was very unwell said. But what I am
On
going to say
purpose.
is that I think I can genuinely say that right now, if I were to be, re-isolated, I would do it for myself.
I guess our point on social pressure and body image, correct me if I'm wrong, the point you've been trying to make is that most of the time, and for you before, it was social pressures and how other people would view you that dictated how much effort you put into your body, how you wanted to look. But independent of that, you can reach the same conclusions that staying healthy and working out and eating well is good. And by doing that, you're going to look good regardless of social pressure.
Yes, and I think those are healthier conclusions. You're more well adjusted when you do things autotelically, and that was discussed in one of our previous episodes, which was happiness. Okay, then we're gonna pass up on some points, but there's one on risk taking and conformity, and I think the first thing that popped into my head was the teenage guy jumping off of a roof to get in a pool, right? And I think there's a very important. I think it's quite self-evident, but I think the reason that guy doesn't do that every evening when he comes back to his own home and it's not the context of a party and there's no one to impress around is because he does that purely out of social, a need for social acceptance. And everything that is done purely for that reason, I would discourage. But Alex, I'm sure, would come to a lesser conclusion, which would only be, you know,
I mean,
be accountable for it.
when you say lesser conclusion, it seems like you're saying it's a worse conclusion.
No, sorry, less strong point.
Yeah, yeah. A weaker point. Um, yeah.
No, sorry. Just an inferior point. Just so we're clear.
Okay. So worse than yours. Yeah,
I don't mean that. I just mean mine is better. Just so we're clear.
Okay. Then that's fine. I think there's. Wait, I'm trying to find my thoughts again. I would agree with you that that person is doing that because of social pressure, but not necessarily for a need because of a need for speed. Not necessarily because of a need for acceptance, but more of a need to or a desire to stand out and to prove to people and girls mostly that you are special and that you are a risk taker because that's something that's attractive in humans. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You want to show people that you're willing to take risks because evolutionarily that meant that you have more resources, and you don't care how big a hit you take from that risk you took. You can withstand it. You have the resources to withstand it. Sorry to go evolutionary biologist on you, but
To those who don't understand male psychology, we think that potentially smashing our head on the border of a pool is a display of dominance. A last point I'd like to address before we wrap up is religiosity and spirituality. And I, my intuition is the following. My non-era stained intuition is the following.
allegedly.
Allegedly, the concept of having a spirituality can be individualistic, can be coming from within, but adhering to a single existing religion must be to
Sourced partly in.
source partly in social approval, because I think it's Ricky Gervais or the other one. No, I think it's Ricky Gervais who said, "You go back 100 years, let things unfold again. All the math manuals are going to be the same. Go back 100 years, let things unfold again. All the religion books are going to be different." I think he said 1,000 years, but whatever. And I think that has some deep impact on the individuality of the values we hold dear, because having a spirituality can be an individual thought, but adhering to one that presently exists, a system that exists, cannot be individual.
I'm not going to add any more comments on that. I think that's a separate point you wanted to make. I don't think what I would have to add would be interesting. So, are we concluding this?
Yeah, and it's going to be taking a kind of a psychological pathway, because now that we've determined that, hopefully some of those things have been eye-opening for you, but a lot of the satisfaction or confidence or approval that we get in general is externally sourced. And I think you'll agree this is a psychological principle. The more it is internally sourced, the healthier you are as a person, the more you will withstand your environment and the things that happen, the life events that happen to you. And the more you personalize, right? Let's just take a simple system like fashion, right? I mean, as you hone in on your sense of style, if challenged on it, and if you can truly get to a point where you're saying, I'm wearing this for myself, well, what is the opinion of one person criticizing your shirt going to ever do?
Yeah, I think maybe the thoughts in this episode and the reflections we've had can influence you in a direction to acknowledge that maybe right now, and I'm not saying I or Chris are perfect, and that we don't realize the extent to which our actions are influenced by society to the fullest. But I can definitely see a change in my life. In the past, I was more insecure, thought more about what people thought, and I was definitely more miserable. Now I've been moving to acknowledging that the way I dress is for other people. And I think just acknowledging that and trying consciously to move past it helps and truly does work. Because now I dress in a way I like and know that I dress partly for other people. And as you said, when I'm confronted with whatever it is, I can say, no, I dress this way because I've considered it. And I guess basically just being more secure with who you are, and hopefully acknowledging how much you also do it for other people can help with that.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back to the clothing example in a way and say, we've kind of talked about conformity, but how about rebellion? How about the people who, walk around in very particular, you can almost call them costumes, right? Do some of those spring to mind?
Rock, metal, black,
Yeah, yeah, whatever that
chains. Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. In ways that are rebellious. Maybe in, 100 years ago, it was the hippies, whatever the era that was. And I think that it's important to note that the opposite of my initial thought experiment could also be true. What if every single one, take how you dress, what if every single person dressed like you? Would you still keep dressing the same? Do you dress with the express purpose of, being polarizing? And if that is so, you often hear those kind of people say, well, I am expressing myself. I am unique. People seek uniqueness. Well, but if everyone dressed like you, right? That's a true expression of yourself, right? Everyone starts dressing like you're gonna switch it up. So if your only intention is to be unique, that is externally driven, correct? And I think that those people should definitely use the two thought experiments to their profit and understand themselves better. But in harnessing self-confidence from within, I'm going to use my dad's quote: when you're going on a highway and you see one person driving in the opposite direction, you tell yourself, oh my god, that person's crazy. You see a second one, you tell yourself, what's going on here? And you see the third one, and you realize that you're the one that's driving in the wrong direction. So I definitely think there's a limit to harnessing self-confidence from within, to the extent that, guess who's the most confident person but can also be wrong and has unproven confidence? Psychopaths, right? Narcissistic psychopaths. I think there's a fine balance between being a narcissistic psychopath and being someone who is fully, conforming with society, fully driven by societal pressure. And that juste milieu, that golden mean,
if you will,
is authenticity, I would like to say, is a very healthy, if we're using psychological terms, is a very healthy and well-adjusted vision of oneself. And I think that if I were to give a short recommendation on how to reach that, it would be to develop meaningful relationships with people who challenge the ways that you think, right? That could apply to a normal person. That could also apply to a psychopath, right? If you were a psychopath and talk to a normal person like Alex and express your views, he would definitely challenge you on them. And if you weren't able to justify your views to someone who doesn't think like you, then you would, I hope that in your mind those decrease a little bit in value. And that is, I think, how you develop internally driven self-confidence.
More on that in our episode on authenticity, as you said.
Yeah. So if I were to wrap it up, I'd say it's very important to be polarizing, right? People were lighting things with candles, and someone came around and it was like, let's just move around some electrons. Let's just do it. If he came to me, I'd probably think he's crazy, but he achieved it. So it's important to be polarizing, but you also have to kind of pre-confirm your sanity and the rigor of your methods. And that is done through a challenge network like friends, perhaps family. We had an episode on family, podcasts, of course, interacting with us. And that is our hope, I think. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Alex?
No, I think we were just about wrapping it up with the figured it out rating.
Absolutely. As Voltaire says, one must cultivate one's own garden. Don't look at the grass on the other side. That is the inspirational message of the day.
For my part, I think the figured it out rating would be a 9. It's a solid episode where we agreed on a lot and where we seemed to hit on some new points that were interesting, but not a top-notch, top-of-the-line episode like one of our previous ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the goals were to kind of raise a little bit of awareness, of self-awareness. And I think we also respected the structure that we set out to have in, outlining popular opinion, giving our opinion. And I hope that we've given practical ways to apply the teachings.
Yeah, I think at the end there was a segment dedicated to that. And I think that's very useful because that's the goal of the podcast. Yeah.
I've also thought about one sentence summaries. If I were to maybe if we were to expand to something like Twitter and we'd had to, quickly summarize.
All right. Acknowledge the way societal pressures affect the way you act and move past that.
Okay. Social acceptance influences your choices more than you think, and that's okay if you work on it.
Very good. I like both versions.
Awesome. I'll go with a 9 because I was socially pressured into doing that.
I said it
Oh,
before.
yes, and we have a title. I think we have a title. We were socially pressed.
Social pressure made us post this episode.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So thank you for listening. Go to thinkingbros.com for more information or contact thinkingbros@gmail.com. I'm Chris.
And I'm Alex.
And we'll see you next week.
See ya.